Life is filled with challenges, uncertainties, and moments of doubt. But in the midst of all this, there is a principle that stands timeless and unshaken: seeking God first. This is not merely a religious concept, but a profound truth that transforms the way we navigate life's journey. When we prioritize God above all else, we align ourselves with the divine order, opening the door for clarity, peace, and provision in ways we cannot manufacture on our own. As the Son, to seek God first means to recognize that He is the source of everything: our breath, our purpose, and our ultimate fulfillment. It is to acknowledge that apart from Him, our efforts are incomplete and our understanding is limited. Many people strive tirelessly to secure their needs, chasing after success, relationships, or material possessions, believing that these will provide satisfaction. The belief that these will provide satisfaction, however, these pursuits often leave them feeling empty or restless because they are chasing the gifts while neglecting the giver. When we turn this approach around and put God at the center, everything else begins to fall into place. Seeking God first is an act of trust. It requires us to believe that He knows what is best for us, even when we cannot see the full picture. It is easy to rely on our own strength, intelligence, or resources, especially when faced with difficulties. Yet these things are finite and often fail us when we need them most. God, on the other hand, is infinite in wisdom, power, and love. And by seeking Him, we tap into a source that is beyond human limitations, a source that provides guidance when we are confused, strength when we are weak, and peace when we are overwhelmed. Peace led by God and peace led by us. This principle is not passive, it demands intentionality. Seeking God involves prayer, meditating on His word, and cultivating a relationship with Him. It means carving out time in our busy schedules to listen to His voice, to surrender our plans to His will, and to trust that He is working all things together for our good. It is in these moments of connection with Him that we gain clarity and direction for the path ahead. The world may offer countless voices and opinions, but none can compare to the wisdom that comes from seeking God. Life's challenges often reveal what we truly prioritize. In times of uncertainty or pain, it can be tempting to focus solely on finding immediate solutions. Yet these moments are opportunities to draw closer to God, to lean into His promises, and to experience His faithfulness. He never promised a life free of challenges, but He did promise to walk with us through them. By seeking Him first, we gain the assurance that we are not alone and that He is actively working to bring us through to the other side. May the Lord. Another important aspect of seeking God first is the transformation it brings within us. When we prioritize God, our hearts and minds are renewed. Our desires begin to align with His purpose, and we start to see life from His perspective. What once seemed overwhelming becomes manageable because we trust in His strength rather than our own. Our values shift, and we begin to seek eternal significance rather than temporary satisfaction. This transformation is not only for our benefit, but also for those around us. As we grow in our relationship with God, we become vessels of His love, peace, and hope, impacting the lives of others in profound ways. One of the most reassuring truths about seeking God first is His promise of provision. Jesus said, "Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." This is not a vague or empty statement. It is a guarantee from the one who holds the universe in His hands. When we focus on His kingdom, on living according to His principles, and trusting in His care, He ensures that our needs are met. This does not mean we will never face difficulties, but it does mean that we can rest in the assurance that He is in control, providing exactly what we need at the right time. To seek God first is to live with an eternal perspective. It is to recognize that our time on earth is fleeting and that true fulfillment comes not from accumulating wealth or achieving status, but from walking in alignment with God's purpose. When we put Him first, we position ourselves to receive His blessings, not just material ones, but the deeper blessings of joy, peace, and contentment that no circumstance can take away. In a world that constantly pulls us in different directions, seeking God first is a deliberate choice. It is a declaration that we trust His plans above our own, and that we value His presence above any earthly pursuit. This choice may not always be easy, but it is always worth it. For when we seek Him with all our heart, we find that He is not only the answer to our questions, but also the source of everything we truly need. Life is a journey marked by seasons of joy and moments of difficulty. While the good times often pass with ease, it is the tough times that test the depth of our faith, the strength of our character, and the clarity of our vision. It is in these moments that God's guidance becomes not just a luxury, but a necessity. His wisdom, comfort, and direction serve as a lifeline, enabling us to navigate the storms of life with courage and hope. God's guidance is not always dramatic or loud. Often, it comes as a still, small voice, whispering truths that anchor our hearts. When we face challenges, whether they are financial struggles, health issues, broken relationships, or the loss of a loved one, the weight can feel unbearable. It is natural in such moments to question our purpose, our strength, or even our faith. Yet, these trials are not meant to destroy us, but to refine us. They are opportunities to experience God's hand at work, leading us through the darkness toward the light of His promises. When life feels overwhelming, it is tempting to rely on our own understanding. We scramble to find solutions, seek advice from others, or lean on temporary comforts that can never truly satisfy. But human wisdom is limited. It can only take us so far. God's guidance, however, is infinite, rooted in His perfect knowledge and boundless love for us. He sees the beginning from the end, and nothing catches Him by surprise. His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. In our most confusing and painful moments, He offers a way forward that may not always make sense to us at the time, but is ultimately for our good. One of the most profound ways God guides us during tough times is through His Word. The Bible is filled with promises and principles that serve as a roadmap for navigating life's challenges. Scriptures like, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," and "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding," remind us that we are not alone. These words are not just poetic expressions. They are declarations of God's faithfulness. When we immerse ourselves in His Word, we gain clarity and strength to face the obstacles before us. Prayer is another vital channel through which God provides guidance. In times of trouble, prayer becomes more than a ritual, it becomes a lifeline. Through prayer, we pour out our fears, frustrations, and doubts, trusting that God hears us. But prayer is not just about speaking. It is also about listening. In the quiet moments of prayer, God speaks to our hearts, providing direction, comfort, and assurance. He may not always give us the answers we seek immediately, but He gives us the peace that surpasses all understanding. A peace that sustains us even when the storm continues to rage. Oh, heaven. God's guidance also comes through the community of believers. During tough times, isolation can be tempting. We may withdraw, believing that no one can understand our pain. Yet, God often uses others to minister to us, to encourage us, and to remind us of His love. A timely word from a friend, a prayer from a fellow believer, or even the testimony of someone who has overcome similar challenges can serve as a beacon of hope. We were not created to walk through life alone, and God's design for community is one of the ways He provides support during difficult seasons. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of seeking God's guidance during tough times is learning to trust His timing. We live in a world that values quick fixes and instant solutions. But God works according to His divine timeline. His delays are not denials. They are opportunities for growth and preparation. While we wait, He is working behind the scenes, orchestrating events in ways we cannot see. Trusting His timing requires patience and faith, but it also brings a deep sense of peace, knowing that He is in control. God's guidance does not always remove the difficulty, but it transforms the way we experience it. Instead of seeing trials as obstacles, we begin to see them as opportunities for growth. Instead of being overwhelmed by fear, we are filled with faith. Instead of feeling abandoned, we sense His presence more profoundly. This transformation does not happen overnight, but as we lean into His guidance, our perspective shifts, and we begin to see His hand at work even in the most challenging circumstances. Tough times will come. They are an inevitable part of life. But they are also opportunities to draw closer to God, to experience His faithfulness, and to grow in our understanding of His purpose for us. His guidance is not reserved for a select few. It is available to all who seek Him with a sincere heart. He is the good shepherd who goes before us, leading us beside still waters and restoring our souls, no matter how dark the night may seem. His light is always shining, ready to guide us to the other side. With God as our guide, we can face any challenge, knowing that He is with us and His plans for us are good. Life often feels like a delicate balance between our desires and the reality of waiting. We are naturally inclined to want things to happen on our schedule, to see results immediately, and to move forward without delay. Yet, life rarely unfolds as quickly or as predictably as we might hope. This tension between our timing and life's timing is where the concept of trusting in divine timing becomes both necessary and transformative. It is the understanding that there is a greater plan at work, one orchestrated by God, who operates beyond the constraints of human time and sees the full picture that we cannot. Trusting in divine timing begins with the recognition that God's perspective is vastly different from ours. He exists outside of time, seeing the beginning, the end, and every detail in between. What feels like a delay to us may be a crucial part of His preparation for something greater. Our human nature often struggles with this reality because waiting can feel like stagnation or denial. But divine timing is not about denying our desires. It is about aligning them with God's perfect plan for our lives. Waiting on God's timing requires patience, and patience is often developed in the waiting itself. It is in the seasons of waiting that our character is refined, our faith is deepened, and our trust in God is solidified. These moments are not wasted, but are an essential part of the process. When we rush ahead of God, relying on our own understanding or attempting to force outcomes, we often create more challenges for ourselves. However, when we surrender to His timing, We allow him to work in ways that far exceed anything we could achieve on our own. One of the most profound lessons about divine timing is learning to trust that God's delays are not his denials. When a door doesn't open or a prayer seems unanswered, it is easy to feel forgotten or overlooked. Yet what we perceive as a delay is often God's way of protecting us or preparing us for something better. He sees the dangers we cannot see, knows the opportunities we are not yet ready for, and understands the fullness of what we truly need. Trusting in his timing means believing that he is always working for our good, even when we cannot see it in the moment. Faith plays a central role in embracing divine timing. Faith is not just about believing in God's existence, it is about trusting his character. It is about believing that he is good, that he loves us, and that his plans for us are for our ultimate benefits. This kind of faith sustains us in the waiting, giving us the strength to endure delays and the peace to rest in his promises. Faith reminds us that God is not bound by our timelines or our sense of urgency. He moves according to his purpose, and his timing is always perfect. The waiting periods in life are often accompanied by lessons that prepare us for what lies ahead. These lessons may be about humility, perseverance, gratitude, or dependence on God. Sometimes the waiting is necessary for us to let go of our own plans and to make room for God's greater vision. It is in these moments of surrender that we discover a profound sense of peace, knowing that we are not in control, but we are in the hands of one who is. Divine timing also teaches us to live in the present. While waiting for future promises, it is easy to become so focused on what's next that we miss the beauty and opportunities of the current moment. Trusting God's timing encourages us to embrace the here and now, to find joy and purpose in the present season, even if it is not what we expected. Every moment, even the waiting, has value and is part of the greater story God is writing for our lives. One of the most reassuring truths about trusting in divine timing is the knowledge that God is never late. His plans are not rushed and they are never delayed. He is always on time, working behind the scenes in ways we cannot see. When the right moment comes, his plans unfold with precision and purpose. The breakthroughs we experience in his timing often carry a weight of significance and blessing that far surpasses what we could have imagined. Trusting in divine timing is not always easy, but it is always worth it. It requires us to let go of our need for control and to place our confidence in God's wisdom and love. It calls us to live with an eternal perspective, understanding that his plans for us are not just for this moment, but for our ultimate good and his glory. In the end, trusting in divine timing is an act of faith, a declaration that we believe in the goodness of God and the perfection of his plans. Though the waiting may be difficult, the rewards of aligning with his timing are immeasurable. He is faithful, and his timing is always right. In life's unpredictable journey, where uncertainty often looms and challenges arise without warning, faith serves as an anchor that keeps us grounded. It is not merely a feeling or a fleeting hope. It is a firm conviction that sustains us through life's storms. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. It provides stability when everything else seems unstable and offers a deep sense of peace, even in the most chaotic circumstances. It is not rooted in our circumstances or emotions, but in the unchanging character of God. And the unchanging character of God. Faith as an anchor implies strength and steadfastness. Just as a ship's anchor holds it steady in the midst of turbulent waters, faith holds our hearts and minds steady amidst the uncertainties of life. When trials come, It is easy to feel tossed around by the waves of doubt, fear, and anxiety. But faith reminds us of a greater reality, a reality that is not determined by what we see or feel, but by the promises of God. The promises of God. It assures us that no matter how fierce the storm, God is in control, and His plans for us are good. This kind of faith is not passive. It is active and intentional. It requires a deliberate choice to trust God, even when the path ahead is unclear. It is easy to have faith when life is going smoothly, but true faith is tested and proven in adversity. When we face challenges, whether they are financial struggles, health crises, broken relationships, or loss, faith becomes our anchor, reminding us that God's presence is constant and His power is sufficient. It is in these moments of testing that our faith is refined, strengthened, and deepened. Faith as an anchor is built on trust in God's character. To trust Him is to believe that He is who He says He is, faithful, loving, and sovereign. This trust is not blind. It is rooted in the evidence of His faithfulness throughout history and in our own lives. When we reflect on how God has guided us, provided for us, and carried us through past difficulties, our faith is reinforced. We are reminded that the same God who was with us before will be with us again, no matter what we face. Another vital aspect of faith is its focus. Faith does not ignore reality or deny the existence of challenges. Instead, it shifts our focus from the problem to the one who holds the solution. It allows us to see beyond the immediate and to rest in the eternal. When Peter walked on water toward Jesus, his faith kept him afloat until he shifted his focus to the wind and waves. Similarly, our faith keeps us steady as long as we keep our eyes on God rather than on our circumstances. This shift in focus empowers us to rise above fear and discouragement, knowing that God is greater than any challenge we face. Faith also brings hope, which is essential in navigating life's difficulties. Hope is the confident expectation of good things to come, rooted in the promises of God. While circumstances may suggest otherwise, faith enables us to hold on to hope, trusting that God is working all things together for our good. This hope does not disappoint because it is anchored in the unchanging nature of God. It allows us to persevere, to keep moving forward, and to believe that brighter days are ahead. Faith as an anchor is not something we muster up on our own. It is a gift from God, cultivated through relationship with Him. It grows as we spend time in His Word, learning His promises and understanding His will. It is strengthened through prayer as we communicate with Him and surrender our worries and desires to His care. It is also nurtured in community as we surround ourselves with other believers who encourage and challenge us to trust God more deeply. One of the most beautiful aspects of faith is that it gives us peace in the midst of the storm. This peace does not come from the absence of trouble, but from the presence of God. It is the peace that surpasses all understanding, guarding our hearts and minds as we trust in Him. Faith reminds us that we are never alone, that God is with us in the storm, and that He is working behind the scenes for our good and His glory. Ultimately, faith as an anchor points us toward eternity. It reminds us that this life is not all there is, that our hope is not in temporary things, but in the eternal promises of God. It gives us the courage to face challenges with the assurance that nothing can separate us from His love. Faith anchors us in the truth that God is good, that He is in control, and that His plans for us are far greater than we can imagine. In the end, faith is not about avoiding life's storms, but about enduring them with confidence and hope. It is about holding on to the anchor that keeps us steady when everything around us is shifting. With faith as our anchor, we can face any challenge, knowing that we are firmly held by the one who never fails. The promise of provision is one of the most comforting assurances from God. It speaks directly to the human heart, addressing our deepest concerns about security, sustenance, and the future. At its core, this promise is a declaration that God, as our Creator and loving Father, knows our needs and is fully capable of meeting them. It is an invitation to trust Him completely, to lay down our anxieties, and to walk confidently in the knowledge that He will provide all that is necessary for us to thrive in His purpose. Provision, as promised by God, goes beyond merely meeting material needs. While He cares deeply about our physical well-being, ensuring that we have food, shelter, and clothing, His provision also encompasses our spiritual, emotional, and relational needs. This holistic provision is rooted in His perfect knowledge of what we truly require, even when we may not fully understand it ourselves. In a world often consumed by scarcity and competition, the promise of divine provision reminds us that we serve a God who operates from abundance and generosity. God's provision is not dependent on our efforts or merits, but on His grace and faithfulness. Jesus emphasized this truth in the Sermon on the Mount, where He encouraged His followers to consider the birds of the air and the flowers of the field. The birds do not sow, reap, or store food in barns, yet God feeds them. The flowers do not labor or spin, yet they are clothed in splendor greater than Solomon's. Jesus' words remind us that if God cares so tenderly for the birds and flowers, how much more will He care for us, His beloved children? This truth challenges us to release the grip of worry and to trust in His faithful provision. At the heart of the promise of provision is the principle of seeking God first. Jesus said, "Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." This statement is both a command and a guarantee. When we prioritize God's kingdom, living according to His principles, and aligning our hearts with His will, He ensures that our needs are met. This does not mean life will always be easy, or that we will have everything we desire. But it does mean that we will never lack what is truly necessary for our journey. Trusting in God's provision requires faith, especially when circumstances seem dire. There are times when the resources we need appear to be in short supply, and fear tempts us to doubt. Yet, it is often in these moments of uncertainty that God's provision becomes most evident. He specializes in making a way where there seems to be no way, providing solutions that exceed our expectations. The story of the Israelites in the wilderness is a powerful example. Despite their lack of food and water, God provided manna from heaven and water from a rock. His provision was not only miraculous, but also perfectly tailored to their needs. God's provision is also an invitation to trust in His timing. Often, we expect provision to come immediately or in the way we envision. But God's ways are higher than ours. He knows exactly when and how to meet our needs, ensuring that His provision serves both our good and His greater purpose. This requires patience and surrender, acknowledging that His timing is perfect, even when it does not align with our own. In waiting for His provision, our faith is strengthened and our dependence on Him grows. Another remarkable aspect of God's provision is that it often flows through unexpected means. He uses people, circumstances, and even challenges to provide for us. The widow of Zarephath experienced this when she shared her last meal with the prophet Elijah. Her act of obedience and trust opened the door for God's miraculous provision, sustaining her and her household through a severe drought. This story reminds us that provision is not always about receiving. Sometimes it is about giving in faith and watching how God multiplies what we have. Remember this story of Jesus. Against all odds, Jesus resisted the urge to jump into the stream. Provision is not limited to meeting immediate needs. It also includes preparing us for future challenges. God equips us with wisdom, skills, and opportunities that enable us to navigate life's complexities. His provision often takes the form of relationships, guidance, and inner strength that sustain us through difficult seasons. By trusting in His promise, we learn to recognize and appreciate the many ways He provides, often in ways we did not anticipate. The promise of provision is ultimately a reflection of God's heart. He is not a distant deity, but a loving Father who delights in caring for His children. His provision is personal, intentional, and abundant. When we trust in His promise, we experience not only the meeting of our needs, but also the peace and joy that come from knowing we are held in His hands. This trust frees us from the constant striving and anxiety that often accompany the pursuit of provision in human terms. In embracing God's promise of provision, we are reminded that He is our source. Everything we have and everything we need flows from Him. By placing our confidence in His ability to provide, we release ourselves from the burdens of fear and scarcity, stepping into a life marked by faith, gratitude, and abundance. God's provision is not just a promise, it is a testament to His unwavering love and faithfulness, a constant reminder that in Him we truly have all we need. Victory through surrender is a paradox that challenges conventional thinking. In a world that celebrates control, dominance, and self-reliance, the idea of gaining victory by letting go appears counterintuitive. Yet, this principle lies at the heart of spiritual truth. Surrender, in the context of faith, does not signify weakness or defeat. Instead, it is the ultimate act of trust in God, acknowledging His sovereignty, wisdom, and love. It is through surrendering to Him that we find true victory. Victory over fear, anxiety, and the limitations of our human efforts. To surrender to God is to let go of the illusion of control. We often cling tightly to our plans, desires, and ambitions, believing that our success and security depend solely on our ability to manage every aspect of life. However, this mindset often leads to stress, frustration, and disappointment when things do not go as planned. Surrendering to God does not mean abandoning responsibility or passively accepting whatever comes our way. In fact, instead, it means entrusting our lives to the one who holds the ultimate authority. It is an act of faith that says, God, I trust you more than I trust myself. True surrender begins with humility. It requires us to acknowledge that we are not in control and that our understanding is limited. This humility opens the door for God's power to work in and through us. When we stop striving in our own strength and allow Him to take the lead, we position ourselves to experience His wisdom and guidance. The Apostle Paul understood this well when he wrote, "When I am weak, then I am strong." Paul recognized that his own limitations were an opportunity for God's strength to be made perfect in him. One of the greatest barriers to surrender is fear. We fear losing control, fear the unknown, and fear that surrendering to God might cost us something we are not ready to give up. Yet, these fears are often based on a misunderstanding of who God is. God is not a tyrant seeking to rob us of joy or freedom. He is a loving Father who desires what is best for us. His plans for us are good, and His ways are higher than ours. Surrender to Him. We are not giving up, we are stepping into His perfect will, which leads to true fulfillment and peace. Surrender also involves letting go of the burdens we were never meant to carry. Many of us struggle under the weight of anxiety, guilt, and the need to control outcomes. These burdens drain our energy and rob us of joy. Jesus invites us to lay these burdens down at his feet, saying, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." In surrendering our worries and struggles to him, we find the freedom and rest our souls crave. This act of trust allows us to live with greater peace, knowing that God is in control and that he will take care of us. Victory through surrender is evident in the life of Jesus. In the Garden of Gethsemane, as he faced the cross, Jesus prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." This ultimate act of surrender paved the way for the greatest victory, the redemption of humanity. Jesus' example teaches us that surrender is not a sign of weakness, but a profound act of obedience and trust in God's greater plan. His surrender brought about a victory that changed the course of history and opened the door for us to experience eternal life. Surrendering to God often requires us to let go of our timing and expectations. We may have specific plans for how our lives should unfold, but God's timing and ways are perfect. When we surrender our timeline to him, we allow him to work in ways that far exceed our understanding. This act of surrender fosters patience and trust, knowing that he is orchestrating every detail for our good and his glory. Victory through surrender is not about losing, it is about gaining. When we surrender to God, we gain his peace, his guidance, and his strength. We experience freedom from the pressures of self-reliance and the constant striving to control outcomes. Instead, we rest in his promises, knowing that he is faithful and that his plans for us are good. Gain faith becomes easy, and there's plans for us are good. Gain faith. Surrender transforms our perspective. It shifts our focus from what we can achieve on our own to what God can accomplish through us. It allows us to live with open hands, ready to receive his blessings and direction. This posture of surrender fosters a deeper relationship with God as we learn to trust him more fully and rely on his power rather than our own. In the end, victory through surrender is about aligning ourselves with God's will. It is about letting go of our limited vision and embracing his infinite wisdom. It is about trusting that his plans for us are far greater than anything we could imagine. Through surrender, we experience the fullness of his grace and the joy of walking in step with him. True victory is found not in holding on, but in letting go, allowing God to lead us into the abundant life he has prepared for us.